Hello everyone, and welcome to the MagM coloring book tutorials. We will be exploring the different coloring techniques you can use to bring your pencil crayon skills to the next level. You're going to need a set of pencil crayons. I suggest a set of 24 or more in order to give you the best variety in color. And of course, a handy dandy sharpener. Gotta keep those pencils sharp. Today we are going to be coloring the Aurora coloring book page. In this video, I'm going to go through how to create that Aurora borealis effect in the sky, as well as mountain textures and tree textures. But first, let's determine our colors. I want my Aurora to be very colorful, so I'm going to choose a pale tone and a dark tone of the following colors: orange, yellow, green, purple, turquoise, and blue. I'm also going to be using a navy blue in the sky to get that nice night sky look, as well as a slightly lighter shade of blue. For the mountains, I'm going to be using gray, but cool gray. I'm looking for a gray which has a slight blue tone to it. Most pencil crayon companies will usually define them as cool gray. If you do not have a cool gray, you can use a light, mid, and dark gray and keep a blue handy just in case. For the trees, I want to create a nice variety of color in the rim. So I'm going to be using 4 different types of green, but I'm going to be pairing them off into 2 different sets, one dark tone, one mid-tone in a similar range of color. Finally, I always have my white and my sepia for highlights and shading. Now that we have our colors, let's get coloring. I'm going to start with the sky, as this is going to take the most precision. The first step is to lay out where I want each color to be placed. I've looked up a few Aurora pictures on Google to give me a bit of help, but the tricky part will be the cone-like shape that I have in the center. I want it to look like the colors are being pulled to the center of the image. Using my palest shades of my colors, I'm going to start making it out using a loose shape that are going to come to a point at the center of the page. My first attempt is not having the effect I want, so I'm going to erase it and start all over again. So long as you have not pressed down hard on your pencils, you can still erase your pencil crayon. So while I still have the time, let's start over. I'm going to need a little bit of help. With a pencil, I'm going to do some lightly drawn lines, which are going to intersect at the very center. Now when I color, I can go grid by grid, making sure that the top of my color goes to the center of the point. These are just guiding lines to help make things a little bit easier. I continue mapping out my sky, alternating colors as I go around, looking at my reference from time to time to help me as I go to ensure that I leave some open space where the dark sky is going to peek out. Once all the colors have been placed, I can fill the empty space in the sky with the dark blue. Not the navy blue yet, though. The reason I'm not putting in the navy yet is because looking at the Aurora borealis picture, I noticed that the blue sky around the colored lights is a bit brighter than the rest. So I want to do the same. If as you're coloring, the colors go into each other, that's all right. In fact, it will give your image the best sense of the Aurora borealis. Once I'm happy with the placement of the colors, it's time to start building it up so that it becomes very vibrant. Working one section at a time, one color at a time, I'm going to start with my dark green to define my darker ripples in the first section. I'm going to keep it loose and place my dark green edges where it feels right. With the lighter green, I'm going to fill out the rest of the loosely placed green. I'm going to blend it into the yellow right next to it, just a slight bit. I'm going to then take my yellow to blend over the edges in a little more. Then I'm going to add back in my mid blue, not the navy yet, to bump up the blue. I'm going then to blend the section using a white pencil by passing over the whole section in the white. In a single stroke, I go over the blue, the green, which will help push everything together. Then I add a bit of my navy at the bottom closest to the mountains to give that nice dark edge. Then I move on to the next section and continue the process going from color to color, keeping things loose and always imagining that my colors are being pulled to the center of my drawing, using my white to blend everything together. Once my first layer is done, I go back in with each color and add more definition by reapplying my dark edges to define them even more. This section is all about layering the colors and building it up slowly. By layering in this matter, we avoid going too dark too soon. It helps us plan our color and ensure that the light areas remain in the drawing. The white continues to be used for blending, which also keeps that brightness in the drawing. Before starting this section, I suggest that you test it out on a separate piece of paper how you want the light to be used. When doing this kind of effect, I tend to do a few tests and continue to test as I go along to make sure that my colors blends will work well. Also, adding a nice dark navy color to the edge is going to help keep the contrast. When you want something to pop out, placing a stark dark color right next to it makes the color jump off the page. In this context, this is exactly what I want to happen. I take my time, I don't want to rush and do a color blend I don't like. Also, remember, it doesn't need to be perfect. The Aurora borealis is a dancing light. It's not perfect shapes. So if you make a mistake, remember, it's not a mistake. It's just your hand deciding that to change the way that you work. And at the very end, I do one last mass blending with the white by concentrating my strokes in the center of the sections where I have my light colors. And I avoid the edges where the mountains and the center. Once I'm happy with the sky, it's time to start working on the mountains. To help me, I pull up a picture of a mountain range as a guide. I start with my mid-gray and start mapping out the fissures of the rocks by adding these paths with my mid-gray. I'm going to work section by section, mountain by mountain, working about 2 or 3 mountains at a time so that they blend perfectly. Once I've mapped it out, I'm going to use my dark gray to darken certain sections of the pathways using my reference image as a guide. As I want to make it look like there's snow on the top of these mountains, I'm going to make sure that some of the sections are left white at the very tops. With the mid-tone veins and the dark tones applied, I can now add the pale gray, keeping in mind where I want to keep that stark white. Before blending the colors all together, I'm going to add in the white sections of the mountains near the top. On the pale gray sections, I'm going to add a little bit of white. I'm going to also take a few of the paler colors and add a few strokes on the top near the stark white to create highlights as if the lights from the night sky are reflecting on the mountains. Once that is done, I can blend my grays. The main portion of the mountain is going to be using a light gray to mix everything together, and the snow caps I'll use my white. Once I'm done blending, I'm going to go back in with my sepia, bringing out some of the details that may have been lost in the blending process. With the sepia, I'm going to make sure that I can clearly see each mountain by defining the shadows cast on the other mountains from the ones in front of them. I'm also going to be adding a pale gray in the whites to add a little bit of texture on the snow caps. I repeat the same process all the way around for all the mountains. Once I've finished the mountains, I can color the final portion, which is the trees. For the trees, I have 4 different shades in total. I'm going to pair them off into 2 groups, one dark, one light in each group. The reason for this is to create 2 tones of trees and create texture within the forest. As I color the trees, I'm going to alternate between the 2 groups of colors randomly. I'm never going to let more than 2 trees next to each other have the same tone of green. First off, I'm going to place the darkest shade of my grouping in the areas underneath where the branch lines are on the drawing. Then covering the whole drawing with a pale green shade using the small strokes. I think I'm going to add an additional pale shade of green just to add a little bit more depth to the blend. But this pale shade of green will be used for all the trees, which will unify them. I use that to blend in all the colors, and because I've colored the drawing with small strokes, wherever the color is paler or missing, my blending color will fill in the rest. Then I go back in with my sepia to define my edges. I repeat this process for every tree, making sure that I alternate the colors groupings to create that texture multi-tone forest. Once the last tree is full of color, I'll look over the drawing and make sure that the details I want are in the drawing. And then we're done. Taking your time in the sky and making sure that you build up the color slowly is the key to this drawing. And the most important part is to have fun. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope this brings your coloring skills to the next level. Remember to have fun with your coloring, and remember where your light source is. Please share your finished drawing on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, or TikTok using the hashtag MAGAMColoring2022. And with that, we will see you next time. Happy coloring!